Hey everyone, welcome to reading class today as we dive into the first chapter that you read alone, chapter 2 from our new book, The Giver. Hopefully you're finding it kind of intriguing or interesting so far. It's definitely a different type of book than we've read so far, it being more of a science fiction book than something that's realistic, like many of our other books have been. Let's dive in and let's find the meanings of our vocab words. Just an encouragement as you continue to write your vocab words for your assignment to be careful to always look up the words as best you can. I know some of you have the white cover book, and I don't think those page numbers quite match my black color book. So in future assignments, what I'm going to try to do is, I think I have another copy of the white color covered book at school, so I'll see if I can find that, and if I do, I'll try to give the page numbers for that book too. But if I can't, my recommendation would be to those who ended up with the white books. I think they were mostly 8th graders and maybe a 7th grader or two. I would encourage you to um, look up the vocab words ahead of time on the worksheet and then watch for them as you read. That way you'll find the page numbers. And if anybody with a white book is willing to share with me each day what they find the page numbers to be, I can share them with the other white book people too, okay? So I'm sorry about that we have a couple different versions of the book out there. Let me know if I can help you or send me a text if you can't find a word and I can try to guide you to the right spot, especially if you have the white book. But don't forget to look these up in the book. I'm still seeing some vocab answers given that don't fully match the context of what the word is. It didn't really make sense for that situation. And when you're giving a definition, make sure you write something that makes sense to you. I'm seeing some really big word definitions where I'm even saying, whoa, I don't even know what that word means. Make sure the definition that you choose is one that makes sense to you, or put it in your own words. Because if the definition doesn't make sense to you, you're really not learning the meaning of a word. So let's practice doing that today. We'll take some of these definitions and put them into words that make sense to us. We're looking for the word palpable, which is on page 3. It's in the second paragraph. I'm just going to start reading. If you have the black book, page 3, second paragraph. I apologize, white book people. You might just have to listen unless you underlined them before. But here's the context of this word. It says, "Now, thinking about the feeling of fear as he pedaled home along the river path, he remembered that moment of palpable, stomach-sinking terror when the aircraft had streaked above." So this is that scene where normally aircraft aren't allowed to fly right over their community, this special community that's set up, right? And he remembered back to this time when an aircraft did, and it wasn't a cargo plane or anything. And it just gave him this stomach sinking terror. Maybe you've been really afraid where it feels like your stomach is sinking. Maybe right before a roller coaster takes off or something, your stomach kind of goes in knots. And even though he's not in that moment right now, he feels a palpable stomach sinking terror when he thinks about it. Maybe you still get a feeling of terror or fear when you think of something scary that happened to you, right? And that's what palpable means. Palpable means you can feel it, something you can feel. So when he thought back at that scary moment, he could literally feel it even then, even though it wasn't going on right then. It was palpable. It was something that he could feel. So palpable is something that you can feel or something that you can imagine so vividly that you're almost experiencing it again. So palpable, something feelable. Supplementary, we'll head to page 7. Come join me, black book people and white book people. If you can find where that is too, that would be awesome. Supplementary is right in the middle of the page in the black book on page 7. Okay, and this is where they're talking about this baby that we later learn the name of, which I won't say yet because that's coming up in your reading for today. But father's been taking care of as a nurturer, right? That's Jonas's father's job. He's been taking care of this baby that's not doing so well. And so here's what father says about this baby. Middle paragraph starting male. "Male," father said. "He's a sweet little male with a lovely disposition. But he isn't growing as fast as he should, and he doesn't sleep soundly. We have him in the extra care section for supplementary nurturing." But the committee's beginning to talk about releasing him. So dad is telling Jonas and the family about this baby he's caring for that doesn't seem to be growing fast enough. And he's worried the baby's going to get released. So they're giving it supplementary care. Extra is what supplementary means, or additional care. They're trying to help out this baby that's not doing so well. So supplementary means extra or an add-on. For instance, maybe some of you take vitamins or supplements in the morning. You're adding those on to your diet by taking the vitamins and getting some better things added on to what you're eating. Aptitude, page 15. Page 15. Aptitude is 1, 2, 3, about 4 paragraphs down, starting "His father smiled." I'll start right there. His father smiled his gentle smile. Well, it was clear to me, and my parents later confessed that it had been obvious to them too, what my aptitude was. I had always loved the new children more than anything. When my friends in my age group were holding bicycle races or building toy vehicles or bridges with their construction sets, and so this is where Dad is talking to Jonas and his family about why he became a nurturer, why he was given that job, because his aptitude had always been to care for little kids. Samara, I think this is something that you have an aptitude for sure. And some of the other kids in our class too, besides Samara, she's just the first one that popped into my mind, have an aptitude for caring for little kids like Jonas's dad. Aptitude means like a skill or a natural ability. Okay, would be what an aptitude means. Or like, for instance, Ryan has an aptitude for soccer. He's good at it. He's naturally good at it. He certainly has practiced a lot, but Ryan, you're naturally good at soccer too. I think you've just got some of the gifts for that. And others too in the classroom. Again, I'm just thinking of a couple examples off the top of my head. Okay, so that's aptitude. Now I notice for some of you, you put skill or ability and then also job. I suppose in some situation an aptitude might be what you do for a job, but remember when you give definitions for your vocab words, choose the one definition that fits best. In this situation, Jonas's dad was talking about his skill or his ability to care for little kids, and that's why the elders chose him to have that job. So let's talk about some of the questions that you faced in this section. While you were reading, you were asked to keep track of what happens with all these different age levels. Remember, in this society, they're trying to make a community that doesn't have any problems. Now, we know as Christians that's not really possible. People have tried before, doing all kinds of various things like this book is talking about, but it's never going to work in this sin-filled world. But that's what they're trying, right? And so one of the things they're doing is everybody grows up in a group of kids that was born that same year, and you get all your stuff the same at the same time. So no one has to be jealous or fight about things, right? And so here are all the things that happen at these various age levels for these groups of kids. Ones get their names, right? And they get given to their families. Remember, even families are assigned. Parents don't have their own kids. They're assigned kids of the kids that would best fit them. Really interesting that they do it that way. The 8s have their cuddle toy taken away, their comfort object taken away. Up until the age 8, they can have a little stuffed animal at bed, but at 8, they have to take that away. 9s get their bicycle for the first time. It's kind of an exciting thing. So all the kids who were born in the same year, when they're in the year where they turn 9, they get their bicycle. And 12s are when they get assigned a job. And that's what Jonas is really nervous about, right? Because he's about to turn 12 or enter into the year where he would turn 12 with his other 12-year-old friends, and he's going to get his job, right? What rule had Jonas's father broken? How was Jonas feeling about this? So normally people are really careful to follow the rules, especially in Jonas's family, right? Because his mom works in the law, right? And making sure people follow the rules. But Jonas's father had looked up illegally the name of their baby boy that he's been caring for at the nurturing center, right? And he found out what the baby boy's name was, Gabe or Gabriel, because he wanted to try to help nurture him better and get him catching up to the other kids, and he thought saying its name would help. How did Jonas feel about that? He was kind of amazed that his dad would break that rule, right? And kind of found it amusing that they found it funny rather than his mom yelling at him or something, right? Why were community rules so hard to change? Number 3. They were so hard to change because not only was there a committee that had to talk about it, a committee of elders, and they'd often just argue about it forever, right? At the end, it had to go to the receiver, this really important guy who had to okay all decisions, right? And usually it took way too long for that to happen. It just wasn't important enough, and most rules were never changed. It just was too long of a process. So the receiver was this guy who's kind of the head of the committee and the community, right? And he has the job of making some really important decisions. How did the elders know what job to assign to everyone? Well, they watched you, right? They watched you at school, they watched you playing, they watched what you did before school and after school and with your families, and they watched what you were good at and what you liked, and they tried to assign a good job to you. That kind of reminded me of our teachers and pastors. That's kind of how it works in a way for our teachers and pastors, right? They get a call. If you decide to be a teacher or pastor someday, I think there are some of us in this class that definitely should. When you graduate from Martin Luther College to be a teacher, you get assigned to a school or in a position. And the way they do that is your teachers and your advisors at the college watch you and they look at what you're good at. Say maybe you're really good at math and there's a school that really needs a math teacher, and so they might assign you there, right? Kind of that same deal, except this is a whole community of elders watching people. So why was it rare for anyone to be disappointed with their assignment? Number 6, well, those elders did such a thorough job of watching everybody, right? They would watch you all the time and take tons of notes, and usually they could figure out what you were good at and what you liked, and so usually people weren't too disappointed with the job that they were chosen for. Number 7, what are 2 ways life would change for Jonas after he turned 12? Well, he'd have less free time to go out and play, right, and things like that. He would also have to be in a new group of friends. He wouldn't be hanging out with all the other 12s anymore. He's going to be hanging out with the people that he gets assigned to at his new job, different aged people. Not that he couldn't see his original friends, it just would be a big change. And so what was on his mind at the end of the chapter 2? He was thinking about this getting assigned his job, and that was making him really, really nervous as the chapter drew to a close. So hopefully this book is making some sense to you as we kick it off. Jonas lives in this community that tries to control every part of people's lives. We talked about last time how that's called a dystopian society or a dystopian community. A dystopian society, just a reminder, is like a government or a society that tries to control its people. Usually they do it because they want to try to get rid of problems and things like that, right? But often the government or the leaders have way too much power and they control everything of people's lives in almost an unfair way where people don't get to make enough choices of their own. And we're seeing that in our book already, right? Where a lot of things are just decided for all the people of the community. Again, they're doing that to try to get rid of problems, okay? But it's something that they're doing that's taking complete control of their people's lives. So I want you to think for a moment, what are some of the things that the society has as control over people? Just all the ceremonies, right? When they turn a certain age, then they're given a bike or their stuffed animals taken away or they're given a job, right? That's a huge control. The fact that the jobs are all decided for them. Their families are assigned. Families don't even have their own kids. They're assigned kids. Pretty crazy, right? That the government has that much power and control. You've already seen that they're observed constantly by these leaders or these elders. All the time. They really don't get too much privacy. And even in their homes, you'll find out that there are recorders, video recorders and sound recorders and things like that. So this is, again, an example of a dystopian society. A society that Jonas lives in where the government really has control over almost everything in his life. And we'll see how he reacts to that as the book goes on further and further. So that brings us to chapter 3, which we're going to read aloud today, and then you guys will be reading chapter 4. As I read, I'm going to pause at a random time and give you your code word, so be listening for that too, so you don't miss that as well. Chapter 3, if you're in the black book, it's page 20. If you're in the white book, I'm sure you can page around and find chapter 3. Follow along as we go. "Oh, look," Lily squealed in delight. "Isn't he cute? Look how tiny he is. And he has funny eyes like yours, Jonas." Jonas glared at her. He didn't like it that she had mentioned his eyes. He waited for his father to chastise Lily. But father, by the way, chastise is one of our vocab words. I'll try to tell you when they come up too in this part of our reading so that you can find them easier, those in the white book. But father was busy unstrapping the carrying basket from the back of his bicycle. Jonas walked over to look. It was the first thing Jonas noticed as he looked at the new child peering up curiously from the basket. The pale eyes. So here's Dad bringing home this baby, Gabriel, to try to raise him at home too, to get him strong enough to make it to his first year ceremony, right? Almost every citizen in the community had dark eyes. His parents did, and Lily did, and so did all of his group members and friends. But there were a few exceptions, Jonas himself and a female 5, who he had noticed had the different lighter eyes. No one mentioned such things. It was not a rule, but it was considered rude to call attention to things that were unsettling or different about individuals. Lily, he decided, would have to learn that soon, or she would be called in for chastisement because of her insensitive chatter. Father put his bike in its port. Then he picked up the basket and carried it into the house. Lily followed, top of 21, behind, but she glanced over her shoulder at Jonas and teased, "Maybe he had the same birth mother as you." Jonas shrugged. He followed them inside, but he had been startled by the new child's eyes. Mirrors were rare in the community. They weren't forbidden, but there was no real need of them, and Jonas simply hadn't even bothered to look at himself very often when he found himself in a location where a mirror existed. Now, seeing the new child and its expression, he was reminded that the light eyes were not only a rarity, but gave the one who had them a certain look. What was it? Depth. he decided, as if they were looking into the clear water of the river down to the bottom, where things might lurk which hadn't been discovered yet. He felt self-conscious, realizing that he, too, had that look. He went to his desk, pretending not to be interested in the new child. On the other side of the room, Mother and Lily were bending over to watch his father unwrap its blanket. "What's his comfort object called?" Lily asked, picking up the stuffed creature which had been placed beside the new child in his basket. Father glanced at it. "Hippo," he said. Lily giggled at the strange word. "Hippo," she repeated, and put the comfort object down again. She peered at the unwrapped new child who waved his arms. "I think new children are so cute," Lily sighed. "I hope I get assigned to be a birth mother." "Lily!" Mother spoke sharply. "Don't say that. There's very little honor in that assignment." So notice a couple of things. Number one, Jonas and his family don't really know what these animals are. They don't exist in his community. So notice Lily has no idea what a hippo is. The other thing to notice is that one of the jobs that some people get assigned, now you know where all the babies and children come from that are given to families. There are literally some people who get the job of being birth mother, and they give birth to all the kids in these communities, which are later then given to the families. Pretty crazy and strange, right? In this weird dystopian community where the government controls everything, even the kids that are born and what families they go to. Pretty crazy stuff. But I was talking to Natasha, last line on 21. You know the 10-year-old girl who, top of 22, lives around the corner? She does some of her volunteer hours at the birthing center, and she told me that the birth mothers get wonderful food and they have very gentle exercise periods, and most of the time they just play games and amuse themselves while they're waiting. I think I'd like that, Lily said petulantly, which, by the way, is another vocab word. 3 years, Mother told her firmly. 3 births, and that's all. After that, they are laborers for the rest of their adult lives, until the day that they enter the house of the old. Is that what you want, Lily? 3 lazy years and then hard physical labor until you're old? Well, no, I guess not, Lily acknowledged reluctantly. Father turned the new child onto his tummy in the blanket. He sat beside it and rubbed its small back with a rhythmic motion. Anyway, Lily Billy, he said affectionately, the birth mothers never even get to see new children. If you enjoy the little ones so much, you should hope for an assignment as nurturer. When you're N8, and start your volunteer hours, you can try some at the nurturing center, Mother suggested. Yes, I think I will, Lily said. She knelt beside the basket. What did you say his name is? Gabriel? Hello, Gabriel, she said in a sing-song voice. Then she giggled. Oops, she whispered. I think he's asleep. I guess I'd better be quiet. Jonas turned to the school assignments on his desk. Some chance of that, he thought. Lily was never quiet. Probably she could hope for an assignment as speaker, so that she could sit in the office with the microphone all day making announcements. Notice there's a job called speaker, and remember everyone in their house has like speakers on their wall, and someone can make announcements to the whole community to give them instructions and things, right? He's joking that would be a good job for his sister. He laughed silently to himself, picturing his sister droning on in the self-important voice that all speakers seem to develop, top of 23, saying things like, attention! This is a reminder to females under 9 that hair ribbons are to be neatly tied at all times. Again, notice the control that they have over all people's lives. Even if your hair ribbon's on wrong, you can get in trouble for that, right? Second paragraph on 23. He turned toward Lily and noticed to his satisfaction that her ribbons were, as usual, undone and dangling. There would be an announcement like that quite soon, he felt certain, and it would be directed mainly at Lily, though her name, of course, would not be mentioned. Everyone would know. So notice they have cameras, even in everybody's house. So if Lily, like she does right now, has her bow on crooked, there might be an announcement later saying, attention, make sure all girls have their bows on straight, right? And even though they won't use Lily's name, it's them actually seeing Lily. Isn't that kind of creepy and crazy, right? But first big paragraph on 23, right, kind of in the middle. Everyone had known, he remembered with humiliation, that the announcement, attention, this is a reminder to male 11s that objects are not to be removed from the recreation area, and that snacks are to be eaten, not hoarded, had been specifically directed at him the day last month that he had taken an apple home. No one had mentioned it, not even his parents, because the public announcement had been sufficient to provide the appropriate remorse. He had, of course, disposed of the apple and made his apology to the recreation director the next morning before school. Jonas thought again about that incident. He was still bewildered by it, not by the announcement or the necessary apology. Those were standard procedures, and he had deserved them, but by the incident itself. He probably should have brought up his feeling of bewilderment that very evening when the family unit had shared their feelings of the day. But he had not been able to sort out and put the words to the source of his confusion. so he had let it pass. It had happened during the recreation period when he had been playing with Asher. Jonas had casually picked up, top of 24, an apple from the basket where the snacks were kept and had thrown it to his friend. Asher had thrown it back, and they began a simple game of catch. There had been nothing special about it. It was an activity that he had performed countless times. Throw, catch, throw, catch. It was effortless for Jonas and even boring, though Asher enjoyed it, and playing catch was a required activity for Asher because it would improve his hand-eye coordination, which was not up to standards. But suddenly, Jonas had noticed, following the path of the apple through the air with his eyes, that the piece of fruit had, well, this was the part that he couldn't adequately understand. The apple had changed. Just for an instant. It had changed in midair, he remembered. Then it was in his hand, and he looked at it carefully, but it was the same apple, unchanged. The same size and shape of a perfect sphere. The same nondescript shade, about the same shade of his own tunic. By the way, that's our code word for today. It's apple. So when you get asked that on your worksheet today, remember apple in honor of Jonas tossing an apple around. Middle of page 24. There was absolutely nothing remarkable about that apple. He had tossed it back and forth between his hands a few times, then thrown it again to Asher, and again, in the air, for an instant only, it had changed. It had happened 4 times. Jonas had blinked, looked around, and then tested his eyesight, squinting at the small print on the identification badge attached to his tunic. He read his name quite clearly. He could also clearly see Asher at the other end of the throwing area, and he had no problem catching the apple. Jonas had been completely mystified. "Ash," he had called, "does anything seem strange to you about the apple?" "Yes," Asher called back, laughing. "It jumps out of my hand onto the ground." Top of 25. Asher had just dropped it once again. So Jonas laughed too, and with his laughter, he tried to ignore the uneasy conviction that something had happened. But he had taken the apple home against the recreation area rules. That evening before his parents and Lily arrived at the dwelling, he had held it in his hands and looked at it carefully. It was slightly bruised now, because Asher had dropped it several times, but there was nothing at all unusual about the apple. He held a magnifying glass to it. He had tossed it several times across the room, watching, and then rolled it around again on his desktop, waiting for the thing to happen again. But it hadn't. The only thing that happened was the announcement later that evening over the speaker, the announcement that had singled him out without using his name, that had caused both of his parents to glance meaningfully at his desk, where the apple still lay. Now sitting at his desk, staring at his schoolwork, as his family hovered over the new child in its basket, he shook his head, trying to forget the odd incident. He forced himself to arrange his papers and try to study a little before the evening meal. The new child, Gabriel, stirred and whimpered, and Father spoke softly to Lily, explaining the feeding procedure as he opened the container that held the formula and equipment. The evening proceeded as all evenings did in the family unit, in the dwelling, in the community. Quiet, reflective, a time for renewal and preparation for the day to come. It was different only in the addition to it of the new child with his pale, solemn, knowing eyes. That's the end of chapter 3. So again, I hope this book's kind of intriguing you as you see just how strange of a life Jonas and his family and everyone in the community lives, where the community and the government is a dystopian government. It has control over just about every aspect of their lives. Can you imagine living that way? Hopefully this will get more interesting and intriguing as you keep going. Have a good rest of your day, guys. Enjoy chapter 4.